It was a sultry summer evening in downtown Arlington, and the bustling streets were teeming with talk and energy as people streamed into cafes and shops. Elijah Grant, a decorated Navy SEAL on leave, strolled easily along the sidewalk in a simple gray t-shirt, snug-fitting jeans, and running shoes. He carried a brown leather messenger bag over his shoulder. Allah was off to stop by a neighborhood bookstore to pick up a novel he'd been eagerly wanting to read for the first time in months. His head had been so keyed up just Elijah drove through an intersection. The distinct rumble of a police car rolling up interrupted his focus. Tires screeched softly as the car came to a halt. A white policeman, Officer Cardin, stepped out of the vehicle with slow, deliberate slowness, his piercing blue eyes scanning Elijah like a hawk measuring its prey. "Hey, you!" Cardin snapped, his voice ringing above the sound of traffic. Elijah halted mid-stride, whirling about to face the officer who held his stare. "You're a bit in a rush, aren't you?" Cardin continued, his voice dripping with unwarranted distrust. "Mind explaining where you're headed?" The query hung in the air, cutting sharply, accusatory. Elijah refused to let it ruffle him. Some passers-by slowed down, catching tension where others simply continued on, used to situations like these. Elijah leaned in, his face impenetrable. "Just heading to the bookstore," he responded flatly. Cardin, crossing his arms, his lips curling into a smirk. "Bookstore? That bag of yours, what's it got you carrying? Anything I should be aware of?" The implication was clear. Elijah felt the burden of the stairs pressing down on him. He could already feel the prejudice behind the officer's words, but instead of anger or frustration, something else flickered in Elijah's eyes. Quiet confidence. "You would rather look?" Elijah said, his voice hardened, nearly defiant. Cardin stood up straight, clearly not expecting that. "I'll be asking the questions," he snapped. A beat of silence elapsed as his hand hung over his utility belt. The crowd quietly thickened as more people paused, phones discreetly drawn from pockets. Elijah shifted his weight fractionally, still relaxed, but something in his service. Cardin stalled for a second, the words ringing clearly on some level he wasn't prepared to acknowledge. The crowd, in the meantime, started to get more restless. "Anything illegal in there?" Officer Elijah asked, his tone being courteous, but edged with unspoken challenge. Cardin slapped the journal shut and shoved it back into the bag, his anger now in evidence on his face. "You're free to go," he barked, stepping back as though trying to regain his control. Elijah did not move. On the contrary, he crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. "Not so quickly," he said, his voice low but strong. "You halted me, charged me with being a good description, searched through my personal belongings, in full view of all these people. I think we're due some explanation." The crowd erupted in concurrence, shouts, voices, crying things like, "What's the reason?" and "You can't just walk away from this." Phones were now trained directly at Cardin, his owners awaiting his next move. Cardin shifted uncomfortably, his previous bravado slipping beneath the weight of the crowd's gaze. Elijah stood tall, serene and unshakable, his very presence rendering it impossible for the officer to brush this off. Cardin's face was a mask of frustration and embarrassment as he regarded the crowd around him, the sheer magnitude of phones on record of his every move. Leaning to draw the air around him, his former confidence lost, replaced by the growing awareness that he himself was under examination, Elijah encountered Cardin's stare. The silence between them stretched out like a challenge. "You're not going to answer?" Elijah questioned, his voice ringing easily over the murmur of the crowd. "What's this description I apparently represent?" Cardin opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was blindingly clear to all onlookers. There had never been a description, just an apology. "Let me see," Elijah said, his voice still placid, but now with venom.